Welcome to 27 Topics. Today we have a very special guest with us from St. Meinrad, Brother John Mark Falkenhain of the Order of St. Benedict. And welcome to
Thank you.
27 Topics.
Pleasure to be here.
You are a psychologist.
That's correct.
You are a specialty in working with children.
Mm-hmm.
You work at Jasper Memorial Hospital.
That's correct.
Do counseling there, I guess.
Yes, in the Outpatient Memorial Counseling Center.
And also teach at the St. Meinrad School of Theology.
I teach courses in human development and then human sexuality as well, and do workshops for them.
Well, our topic today is reclaim your family. How do we go about reclaiming our family? It's everyone seems to be in a hurry and involved in many things, and the family seems to suffer. How do we start reclaiming our family?
Well, I think certainly society right now, although it's hard to sort of speak of society sort of as one big thing, but certainly the pace of our lives is probably faster than it used to be. It seems that we get more and more active as individuals and as families. Even as monks, we consider ourselves a family. We're each other's family, and we find ourselves busier than ever with more demands on our time, and sometimes fewer of us to do those jobs. And so we have to make more of a concerted effort to be families, and I think that's true not of monastic families, but of families in general. And a lot of times people are talking about the importance of, we should have quality time over quantity. And while I agree with that in some ways, I think it's also important that we do have a basic amount of quantity time, though, that sometimes nothing replaces just kind of wasting time with each other, if there is such a thing, as just being together, even if it doesn't have a particular agenda, because it's in being together and spending time with each other that we do sort of really know each other and learn from each other. And
in the families today, with the children that we have and that they have, they want them to be involved in everything, and in so many activities. And sometimes these activities even take the place of taking a moment for God, God is probably one of the main centers of the family.
Sure.
So how do we keep that in perspective?
I don't know. I have a wonderful friend back in St. Louis who I think is just one of the best moms that I know, and certainly a person of faith, certainly one of the best Catholics that I know. And I was always amazed by her ability to kind of make the experience of faith and the experience of God a very sort of ordinary thing. And so when she would take her kids to the playground and they'd be having a great time, she would just be mindful of, she would say, "Oh, kids, come back over here for just a second and let's just take a minute just to thank God. What a great time we're having and what a great day, and to be grateful for that." And that probably took all of maybe 15 seconds or 30 seconds, but it was bringing sort of her faith life into the ordinariness of her life, as busy as it was. And she had 5 children, so I'm sure it was very busy. But they're not, I don't think they're mutually exclusive from each other, being busy and also being people of faith, or being sort of a family. Sometimes people think that our current society is so busy, or the information age and the media age is really sort of destroying the family. And I think we have to be careful, because if we really buy into thinking that way, then we might as well kiss the family goodbye, because it doesn't seem to me that we're going to be able to slow the world down, or that we're going to be able to decrease the amount of information or the stimulation that we have around us. And so, as families have always had to do, I think we have to figure out how to adapt our family life into the current world that we live in, and not see them as quite so exclusive. But it does mean sometimes that we do have to make some decisions and place some limits around some of the things that we can do and how we do them.
If you are and today the spouses work, and then the kids grow up to be into the teenage years, and in addition to school and other activities, they probably have a part-time job to earn some money. so they can have a little spending money and feel to be their own.
Sure.
But doesn't that all take away from the family?
It certainly has the potential to, yes. And I think it's helpful sometimes that we sit back and we think about what our priorities are, and what is the use of that money that we're making. It's always amazing to me that we have more and more conveniences that should be able to sort of speed the work that we do, and yet we have less and less time, it seems, as a result, especially compared to sort of laborers in past centuries where everything had to be done by hand. Now we can do things so much more quickly, and yet somehow we still find ourselves kind of ragged at the end of the day, and maybe even more so. But we use that time that we free up to invest ourselves yet in more things that we get busy with. And I guess the questions that we have to ask ourselves, and I say this as a monk as well, I mean, we benefit from all the same conveniences, is how do we spend those resources of time and money that we make? Is it to improve the quality of our lives, or to keep investing in getting ourselves busier and busier? And so sometimes it's just hard for us to slow down and feel like we're sort of doing nothing and wasting time, but it's not such a bad thing to do. I was just saying today recently to someone that I had seen just a small piece on a program, I think it was even a cooking program or something, where a gentleman, one of the commentators, was saying that it used to be that weekends were really the time for rest, particularly Sunday was the time for rest. But now as sort of stores stay open on Sundays, and as we get busier and busier through the work week, we end up sort of using Sunday for doing all the things that we couldn't get done during the rest of the week. And so we mow our grass, or we get our shopping done, or we go to the mall. And so rather than taking Sunday as literally a day to do nothing and rest and let our minds sort of recover and our bodies recover and just enjoy the people that are around us, we do all those other things. And we sort of consider them recreation because they're not our jobs, yet they're still just as active and just as taxing, kind of physically and psychologically sometimes.
Yeah, nobody will come and mow my lawn.
Right.
You know,
right. It still needs to be mowed.
It needs to be mowed
Yes.
one way or the other. So, but how do you? How can families work to strengthen their bonds as family?
Well, I think they have to do that slowly, and they have to be concrete. I think it's enough to say, yes, we need to spend more time together. And sometimes people bite off more than they can chew, in a sense of, let's make an effort to do that without getting really to the practicalities of how. But I think making sort of simple and attainable sort of goals for themselves in terms of, let's decide at least on one night a week that we're going to eat together, or let's decide on Sunday afternoons we're going to do this together. And but I do think people have to sort of be concrete about what they're going to do, and they have to talk about what the sacrifices are going to be in order to do those things. It's not that, I believe that people do want to spend time together, but there are so many demands placed on them that they don't feel like they can stop doing the other things. And I'm being sort of frank with yourself about, well, what are we not going to do in order to be able to do this? And does it mean that I'm not going to work that second job, so we're going to have a little less money, and so we're going to have to cut back on this? Or we're going to have to not participate in this sport or that sort of thing. But sort of be upfront with ourselves about what are the sacrifices that we're going to make in order to set this time aside for this. And that's why I say I think it's important for us to prioritize what really is important. I think, that's what monks, at least, try to kind of model, or that's the witness that we try to provide in the world, is we say that our faith and our faith in God and our community life are the most important things in our lives, and so we're willing to make some sacrifices in order to live around sort of our faith, in order to be in church 4 times a day, in order to pray together, and in order to do spiritual reading and stuff. And so there's lots of things that I'm not able to have anymore. But it's not all sacrifice. It's also because I've decided that my faith life, this is the priority for me, and that's what I'm going to invest my time in, and my energies in my life, even if it means that I can't have the family, or I can't have this kind of work, or I can't have these sorts of things. And so,
also today, in my growing up, the family was a family for, home till death.
Yeah.
today you have mixed families.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, how can they go about strengthening their bonds? Probably, they trade weekends and different parents this weekend. How can you strengthen those bonds?
That's really complicated, isn't it? When you have children that belong to, you have half siblings and full siblings, and different people are, the family looks different depending on sort of the weekend or the day of the week. I think it's really, really important, and this is really, really more difficult to say than to do, but I think it starts with the parents' ability to communicate with each other even once they're no longer married and they're no longer in sort of a family relationship with each other. That sometimes the sort of how we relate to each other and how we communicate with each other send some very important messages about what it means to be family. And so I certainly work with a lot of children from situations, from divorce situations, and I found that the more and more the divorced parents can not necessarily have a loving relationship with each other anymore, although, if they did have that, they would still be married. But if they can still have an amicable or a good working relationship with each other that's respectful and that they can sort of plan wisely with the interests of the child in mind, not only does that really help the mental health of the child, which strengthens the family, but it also sends a really important message to the child about relationships and the importance of relationships and how to get along as a family, even though it's a different kind of family than it once was. In terms of, how do you build relationships among families that are constantly changing, I think that's a challenge. I think it's important for children to spend time with their biological parents if at all possible, and it's safe for them to do that. And sometimes a child needs to spend time just with their biological parent without the step-siblings and necessarily the stepfather, particularly because it's easy sometimes for that relationship to get lost in the other layers of relationships that are happening. So doing things as a whole family, but also sometimes doing things as sort of subunits of the family that once existed and need to kind of be maintained and respected for the sake of the child.
If you or someone you know has a talent to showcase or an event to promote on 27 Topics, please contact this station.
Why is it is important to teach your kids the family unit, informing the values as a child of the family. How do you go about doing that? You have all these problems facing.
Well, a little bit of, it was a very specific example, but continuing to, let me back up and say that it's so important for parents to realize that not only what they say, but sort of how they act and what they do is going to send so many not only important messages, but teach a child so much about not only just values, but how to cope, how you rely on family, what it means to be a family. And so, we say it all the time as a cliche that the parents are the primary teachers, not only of faith, but of lots of things. And so the more that a couple of parents can do to strengthen their own relationship and to communicate well with each other, and to do that in front of their children. Even sometimes, every couple sort of fights and has disagreements, even to expose the child to appropriate kinds of disagreements and fighting and what it means to sort of solve those problems together. For a child to see two people working as a team and dealing with conflict and dealing with sort of moving beyond conflict because there's something greater there than the conflict, which is a love for each other, sends a really powerful message for a child in terms of what it means to be a family and how to act as a family and how to stick in sort of through the hard times. Because being a family certainly isn't always fun all the time.
There isn't anything that's fun all the time.
No, there isn't, is there?
It doesn't make any difference whether
Well,
it's
being a
family
monk,
or-
of course, but
Oh, there you go. That's a great line. With the family and the child formation seems to be really important.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it seems like it is lost, and there are parents who, let the kids do what they kind of want to do, grow up to be what they want to do.
yeah.
And not really, involved too much. They're busy, they're doing this, and
Mm-hmm.
and some of them do well in that way, and others get in trouble. Huh?
Yeah.
What can we do?
Well, don't you think that that one of the influences that we talk a lot about in our society is sort of an individualistic sort of influence, and we hear it said all the time that that's a very kind of an emerging, or it has been an emergent sort of value in our society, and I would say we hear about that enough to say that that's probably true. I think that what we have to, what would be helpful for children is to learn how to be mindful of others, but also to learn children that everything that we want we can't always have. And so we teach kids the economy of life in a way that, you were talking earlier about, we want to get kids involved in soccer and baseball and dance and piano lessons and all that kind of stuff. And all of those are, every single one of those is a really wonderful thing where there are lots of wonderful lessons to learn. But at some point we need to grow up learning that we can't do everything that's really wonderful, and we can't have everything that we want. And so sort of teaching our young people and teaching ourselves and recognizing ourselves that there are limits to what we can do, and sometimes the joy in life is sort of moving beyond our limits and really investing ourselves in the few things that matter to us. And so even if, the child would like to play these 3 sports and join this activity, for a parent to be able to say, all of those things are really wonderful things, but we can't do all of them, so why don't you choose one of the sports and one of the activities? And while the child might be angry or disappointed, and we don't always like to see our children disappointed, it's an important lesson where you sort of learn the economy of time and the economy of sort of our energy and what we can do. And it's best to learn those things early rather than later. And then you learn what the benefits of those are and how much you really value the things that you've chosen, even though you've had to let go of some of the things that you can't have.
Is it possible to stop and smell the roses?
I hope so, but sometimes, I saw that as a phrase and something to think about. I think it's important too that we don't always though be looking for roses to smell. So I'm going to take that sort of phrase fairly literally. That maybe sometimes we need to stop and smell the dandelions or the daisies that are more common than the roses, and that we learn to appreciate the things and the sort of normal everyday experiences that are around us that really are good, but that we sort of overlook sometimes for the more spectacular and sort of the bigger, more important moments in life. And so it's one of my favorite themes, actually, of sort of the Benedictine life is the idea of what we say, sort of consecrating the ordinary. That our faith or goodness in life isn't always out there somewhere, some mountaintop experience, but that sort of holiness or God or wonderful life experiences are around us all the time. And it's important that we cultivate an awareness of the beauty and the holy and the godly that is around us right here and right now. Otherwise, we're always living in the future or looking for something that is beyond us rather than celebrating and appreciating and living sort of the goodness that surrounds us.
So we shouldn't always think about we're smelling the roses.
Yeah, we should think about smelling something, I suppose. But I don't think it always has to be roses. Sometimes life does give us roses, and then we should sniff them all that we can. But we should be mindful too of the daisies and the dandelions and maybe even the weeds at times. But
well, you know, that we probably do whether we want to or not. You know?
Yes, and that, you know, it's sort of like when I was talking earlier about that woman who sort of stopped in the middle of play. It's exactly what she was doing. You know, she was taking a very ordinary thing and just pointing out to the children what a great time we're having. We're having this time as a family, and let's also be mindful sort of God and sort of this as a blessing. And so she, you know, she takes a dandelion or she takes a daisy rather than a rose, and you know, it wasn't a trip to the ball game, it wasn't a trip to Six Flags or Holiday World, it was simply playing in the park, and she was able to sort of use it as a wonderful experience of sort of the goodness of life and what it meant sort of to be a family, and I think that's spot on.
Of course, you talking about that reminds me of the photograph that's called the Angelus.
Mm-hmm.
The years ago, families, when the bells tolled, they did pause.
Yes.
No matter what they were doing for a few minutes, and I mean, it was just
a
few minutes is all it took, and think about the good Lord.
It's one of the wonderful things about the monastery and being at St. Meinrad, and that we still have the bells that ring every 15 minutes, and we have the bells that ring certainly for 15 minutes or 5 minutes before either Mass or Vespers or Vigils and Lauds. But in addition to that, the bells ring every 15 minutes just to mark the quarter hour. And you know, the sound of the bells is tied sort of inextricably with prayer and mindfulness of God. And so the wonderful thing about those bells is that it's almost as if they can't stop ringing long enough. You know, the sound of them barely dies away before you hear them again. And it's just that mindfulness that I think that we need to sort of cultivate in our lives. That it's not that our family or our God or the important things in our lives are here and the rest of our busyness is here. We somehow have to figure out how to bring those together and make them sort of frequent and a daily and a commonplace part of our everyday existence and our busyness. And
so, you know, we have, you know, several different things that we can work with. I guess, what is the most important? We've discussed several things here. What would be the most important thing to tell the viewing audience to keep the family together?
Well, I think certainly spending not only quality time, but I would say spending a quantity of time together. And perhaps one of those things that people should do as a family is to sit down together and talk about what are to spend some time on the forefront, talking about what are the times that we appreciate as a family, what do we like doing together, and how can we commit ourselves to doing some of those things more often, not all the time, but more often. And then what are the things that we are going to have to give up in order to make that happen, and who's willing to sacrifice this time here or that time here in order to do that. But to say that you're going to spend better family time together and to try to do that, it's nice to say that, but you have to begin somewhere. And I love the phrase that is, begin as you intend to finish. If you intend to be more family-oriented somewhere down the line, well, don't wait for that to happen someday. Begin now and figure out what it is that you have to do in order to do that. But look for those opportunities to do that in the things that you're already doing, being mindful to that sometimes you have to let go of some of those things in order to make the sacrifices to sort of follow those priorities if family is your priority and faith is your priority. So.
Brother John Mark Falkenhain,
Mm-hmm.
we appreciate having you as our guest today on
Thank you.
27 Topics.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.